My name is Olivia. I am 33 years old, and for my entire adult life, I was my family's personal bank account. I never bragged to my parents that I built a massive financial technology company. I never told them that I currently take home $300,000 a month. I kept my wealth entirely hidden. I drove a beaten-up 12-year-old Toyota, wore plain clothes, and lived quietly, all just to maintain some illusion of a normal family dynamic. Last Saturday afternoon, my boyfriend Liam, who is 34 and works long shifts as an emergency room nurse, drove with me to my parents' luxury condo in downtown Chicago. We were there to surprise them with the news of our engagement. We even brought a bottle of expensive champagne to celebrate. But as we stood in the hallway right outside their heavy mahogany front door, I heard voices echoing from inside. It was my mother Brenda and my younger sister Natalie. I paused, holding my hand up to stop Liam from knocking. My mother was laughing loudly, the kind of sharp, calculating laugh she only used when she was getting exactly what she wanted. I leaned in closer to the door. Natalie was whining about how her husband Kendrick absolutely needed a Porsche for his image. Kendrick is a flashy guy who calls himself a crypto investor, but I always knew he was just a grifter living way beyond his means. My mother told Natalie not to worry. She said just wait until Olivia gets her year-end bonus next month. We will tell her your father is drowning in medical debt. She always falls for that guilt trip. We can siphon off at least $50,000, and Kendrick can put down the deposit for his sports car. My blood ran completely cold. Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. For years I had paid their mortgages, covered their extravagant vacations, and bailed them out of every financial mistake, believing I was doing the right thing for my family. Hearing them plot to steal from me, to buy a luxury car for my lazy brother-in-law, was the absolute final straw. I looked down at the beautiful diamond ring on my finger. I took it off and slid it deep into my pocket. I looked at Liam and whispered that we were going to test them. I reached out and pushed the unlocked front door open, stepping right into the middle of their perfect afternoon. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who only valued you for what you could provide. The moment I stepped into the sprawling living room, the atmosphere changed. The condo smelled like expensive vanilla candles and fresh espresso. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning, unobstructed view of Lake Michigan, a view I had practically paid for. My mother and sister were lounging on the white leather sofa, sipping wine. They froze when they saw me. There was no warm greeting. There was no hug. My mother immediately frowned, her eyes darting to my empty hands. "You are early," my mother snapped, annoyed that she had been caught off guard. "And you brought the nurse." She did not even use Liam's name. She just called him the nurse, dripping with absolute contempt. I ignored her tone. I walked further into the room, putting on the most devastated expression I could muster. "Mom." "Natalie, I need to tell you something terrible," I said, making my voice tremble. "I just got called into the office. The company is doing massive restructuring. They laid me off. I am completely jobless. I lost everything, and there is no annual bonus this year. I cannot pay the maintenance fees for this condo next month." I waited for the shock. I waited for my mother to stand up and comfort her eldest daughter who had just lost her livelihood. I waited for my sister to offer a single word of sympathy. Instead, the room went dead silent. The temperature plummeted. Natalie practically leaped off the couch, her face twisting into a mask of pure panic and anger. "Are you kidding me?" Natalie shrieked. "You got fired. How could you be so stupid and careless, Olivia? Kendrick has big investment meetings coming up. We were counting on your money to help us secure our transportation. You promised you would help us." "I never promised you a dime," I replied, keeping my voice remarkably calm despite the rage boiling in my chest. "I just lost my job, Natalie. I have no income." My mother slammed her wine glass down on the glass coffee table so hard I thought it would shatter. She stood up, her face flushed with fury. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not ask how I would pay my own rent. She marched over to a mahogany side table, snatched up a thick envelope, and stomped right up to me. "This is unacceptable." My mother hissed, glaring at me like I was a stranger who had just tracked mud onto her pristine carpet. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? I told all my friends at the country club that my daughter was a senior executive. Now you are just another unemployed failure. She shoved the envelope hard against my chest. I grabbed it reflexively. That is the bill for your father and my 20th anniversary party at the club next week, she demanded. It is $20,000. The catering is already booked, and the deposit is non-refundable. I do not care if you have to max out every single credit card to your name or take out a high-interest loan. You are going to pay this bill today. I looked down at the invoice, genuinely amazed by her audacity. Mom, I just told you I have zero income. I am unemployed. How do you expect me to pay a $20,000 party bill? My mother let out a short, cruel laugh. She slowly turned her gaze toward Liam, who was standing quietly near the doorway, observing them with a completely unbothered expression. Well, she sneered, crossing her arms over her chest. If you are broke, what good is your little nurse boyfriend? He wipes up sick people for a living. He makes pennies. He certainly cannot carry you, and he cannot carry this family. You better figure it out, Olivia, because nobody in this house is going to support a freeloader. Liam did not flinch at her insult. He just gave me a knowing look. The trap was set, and they had walked right into it, showing their true colors without a second thought. I held the $20,000 bill in my hand, staring at the woman who gave birth to me, finally realizing that I owed her absolutely nothing. Before I could even formulate a response to my mother, a slow clap echoed from the hallway. Kendrick strolled into the living room wearing a smirk that made my skin crawl. My brother-in-law was dressed like a walking billboard for new money. He wore an oversized designer sweatshirt plastered with loud logos, perfectly crisp sneakers, and a thick gold chain resting over his collar. He held a glass of sparkling water, looking us up and down as if we were dirt. Well, well, Kendrick chuckled, shaking his head. The mighty executive falls from grace. I always told you, Olivia, working a traditional corporate job is a trap. You are building someone else's dream while they toss you out like garbage the second they want to save a few bucks. You should have listened to me and diversified your portfolio into crypto. I stared at him, gripping the $20,000 invoice. Kendrick, you have never held down a real job for more than 6 months. You play with unregulated digital coins on your phone while sitting on my parents' couch. Natalie gasped, rushing to Kendrick's side and wrapping her arms around his waist. Do not speak to my husband like that, she snapped. Kendrick is the CEO of his own hedge fund. He is an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur who still needs my supposed bonus to buy a car, I thought. But I kept my mouth shut. Kendrick waved his hand dismissively. Let her be bitter, babe. People lash out when they hit rock bottom. He turned his attention away from me and focused entirely on Liam. Up until this point, Liam had been standing quietly by my side, observing the circus with the clinical detachment of a medical professional. Kendrick took a step closer to Liam. And then there is you, man, Kendrick said, his voice dripping with condescension. The Florence Nightingale of the family. Tell me something. How does it feel knowing your woman is broke and you cannot do a single thing to bail her out? Liam met his gaze evenly. His voice was calm and polite. I think Olivia and I will manage just fine, Kendrick. We have each other. That is more than enough. Kendrick threw his head back and laughed loudly. Love does not pay the mortgage, bro. Love does not keep the lights on. Let us be real. You are a nurse. You wipe down beds and empty fluids for $30 an hour. You are pushing 35 and still wearing generic jeans and driving that embarrassing old Toyota. You are supposed to be a provider. Liam did not frown. He simply offered a polite, serene smile. I am very proud of the work I do, he replied softly. Saving lives has a value that goes beyond a paycheck. That calm smile absolutely infuriated Kendrick. Bullies hate nothing more than a target that refuses to be intimidated. Kendrick reached into the back pocket of his jeans, pulled out a thick leather wallet, and dramatically extracted a crisp $100 bill. He snapped the bill between his fingers and held it out toward Liam. Tell you what, Florence, Kendrick sneered. My leased Mercedes is parked downstairs. A bird ruined the wax job on the hood this morning. Since your household income just dropped to near zero, why do you not take this $100, go down to the garage and wash my car? Consider it a charitable donation. The room fell completely silent. My mother smirked, clearly enjoying the humiliation. Natalie giggled. I felt a surge of pure fury, but before I could step in, Liam spoke. "No, thank you, Kendrick," Liam said, his voice still completely level. "It looks like it might rain later this evening. A wash would be a poor investment of my time and your money, but I appreciate the offer." Kendrick withdrew his hand, his jaw tightening. The refusal to engage made him look small and foolish. Just then, my father Richard walked into the living room from his home office. He was wearing a tailored suit, looking every bit the distinguished gentleman, though I knew his credit cards were maxed out. He had heard the entire exchange. Instead of reprimanding Kendrick for disrespecting a guest, my father sighed and shook his head at Liam. "Kendrick is right, Liam," my father said, walking over to pour himself a glass of bourbon. "A man is judged by his ability to generate wealth and secure his family's future. Kendrick is a visionary. He understands the modern market. He takes risks. You, on the other hand, are a financial dead weight. You chose a low-level service job. If Olivia is truly out of work, she needs a partner who can step up. You cannot provide the lifestyle my daughter was raised to expect. You are a liability." I looked at my father, the man whose gambling debts I had quietly settled 3 years ago so he would not face bankruptcy. He was calling the man I loved a liability while praising a con artist. The sheer hypocrisy was suffocating. I had seen enough. The test was over. They had failed spectacularly. I turned to the coat rack by the door and grabbed my jacket. "We are leaving," I said, tossing the country club bill onto the entryway console table. "Pay for your own party, Mom. I am done." Liam let us go. Liam nodded, turning to follow me toward the door. I reached for the brass handle, desperate to breathe the fresh air outside and leave this toxic environment behind forever. But as my fingers brushed the cold metal of the doorknob, Kendrick's voice rang out across the living room, laced with unbearable smugness. "Going so soon," Olivia Kendrick called out, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. "Come on now, do not run away just because things got a little tough. We are family. We take care of our own. In fact, good thing my $300,000 business loan cleared the bank this morning. The funds are officially sitting in my business account right now." I froze. My hand stopped turning the knob. I knew exactly what Kendrick's credit score was. I knew he had defaults on his record. There was absolutely no bank in the country that would approve him for a $300,000 commercial loan. Kendrick chuckled, mistaking my frozen posture for intimidation. "That is right. 300 large. My crypto fund is about to disrupt the entire decentralized finance market. I am scaling up operations Monday, so since you are officially unemployed and broke, maybe I will do you a huge favor. If you beg nicely, maybe I will hire you as my personal assistant. You can fetch my coffee and manage my calendar. I will even pay you minimum wage." I slowly turned around. I looked past Kendrick's smug face, past my parents' proud smiles, and locked eyes with my sister Natalie. She suddenly looked terrified. She was chewing her bottom lip, her face entirely pale, actively avoiding my gaze. The pieces of a very dark, very illegal puzzle violently snapped together in my mind. I took a slow, deliberate step away from the front door. I let go of the brass handle and walked right back into the center of the living room. Liam followed right behind me, his relaxed posture shifting just slightly, sensing the immediate change in my demeanor. I looked straight at Kendrick. $300,000, I repeated, keeping my voice dangerously low. "You secured a $300,000 commercial loan this morning, from a legitimate financial institution." Kendrick puffed out his chest, completely misinterpreting my tone as awe. "That is exactly right. Fully funded and sitting in the checking account." I crossed my arms. "That is fascinating, Kendrick, truly, because last Thanksgiving you were complaining loudly at the dinner table that you could not get approved for a basic airline credit card. You had 2 vehicles repossessed in the last 4 years. Your credit score is barely hovering above 500. So tell me, what financial institution in their right mind handed you $350,000 in unsecured capital?" Kendrick's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable in his expensive sneakers. He glanced at Natalie, who was now aggressively twisting her wedding ring around her finger, refusing to look at me. "That is the beauty of decentralized finance," Kendrick bluffed, waving his hand vaguely in the air. "You find private lenders who look at the business model, not just a meaningless credit score." My pitch deck was flawless. The investors saw the vision. "I am not an idiot," I snapped, my voice finally rising, cutting through the heavy vanilla scent of the room. "You do not get a $300,000 loan without collateral or a cosigner. And considering Natalie works part-time at a boutique and spends more than she earns, she certainly did not co-sign for you. So who did?" Silence fell over the room. The only sound was the low hum of the luxury refrigerator in the kitchen. My mother rolled her eyes and sighed loudly, acting as if I was being entirely unreasonable. "Olivia, stop interrogating him," my mother said, waving her empty wineglass at me. "You are just jealous because he is succeeding while you just lost your job. It is not a good look on you. You should be asking him for advice, not attacking him." I did not even look at my mother. My eyes were locked entirely on my sister. Natalie was physically shrinking back into the sofa cushions. Her face was pale and her breathing was shallow. "Natalie," I said, my voice turning to ice. "Look at me." She would not. "Natalie," I repeated louder this time. "Who co-signed that loan?" She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with forced defensive tears. "It is not a big deal," she burst out, her voice pitching high and whiny. "It is just a formality. The bank just needed someone on paper with a solid credit history. Kendrick is going to make millions from this project. You will not even notice it is there." The floor seemed to drop out from underneath me. A cold sweat broke out across my back. I stared at her, praying I had misunderstood her twisted logic. "What do you mean I will not even notice it?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Natalie stood up, crossing her arms defensively, adopting the classic victim posture she had perfected since childhood. "Do not act like you are so innocent, Olivia. When we were in college, I let you use my laptop all the time for your assignments. We share things. That is what sisters do. I just borrowed your information to help my husband. You have a perfect credit score. You were not even using it for anything important. You just sit in your apartment all day." I felt Liam step closer to me. His jaw was clenched, but he remained silent, letting me handle it. I took a deep breath, trying to process the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. "You borrowed my information," I repeated, articulating every single syllable so there could be no misunderstanding. "You took my social security number. You forged my signature. You committed federal identity theft and wire fraud to secure a high-risk commercial loan for a man who has never turned a profit in his life." Kendrick stepped in front of Natalie, glaring at me. "Watch your mouth," he barked. "Nobody committed fraud. We are family. We just leveraged family assets to build generational wealth. When my crypto token takes off next month, I am going to pay the loan off in full. You should be thanking me for cutting you in on the ground floor." "Thanking you," I laughed, a harsh, breathless sound. "You stole my identity. If you default on that loan, the bank comes after me. They seize my assets. They garnish my wages. You put a $300,000 noose around my neck without even asking me." Natalie started crying openly now, letting out loud, theatrical sobs. "You are so selfish," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. "You have always been so selfish. I just wanted my husband to succeed. You have no idea what it is like to struggle. Everything comes so easily to you. You do not even care about my happiness." My mother rushed over to Natalie, wrapping her arms around her golden child, shooting me a look of pure venom. "Look what you have done," my mother hissed at me. "You made your sister cry." "I do not care if she is crying," I shouted, finally letting my anger loose. "She committed a felony. Kendrick, you are going to call that bank right now. You are going to cancel that loan, return the funds, and take my name off that paperwork, or I am walking straight to the police station and pressing charges." The word police hung in the air like a live grenade. Kendrick's eyes widened in genuine panic. For a second, nobody moved. Then a sudden violent crash made us all jump. My father slammed his fist down on the glass coffee table with such force that my mother's wine glass toppled over, spilling red wine across the white rug like blood. He stood up, his face purple with rage, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "You will do no such thing!" My father roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "She is your sister. We are family. You do not call the police on your own blood. You have great credit." "She does not. Kendrick has a real vision, and you are going to support it. Stop being so incredibly selfish and accept your responsibility to this family." I stared at my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, as he stood over the ruined coffee table. He was actually defending a crime. "Accept my responsibility?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and pure disbelief. "He stole my social security number, Dad. That is not a family favor. That is a felony." My mother stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Olivia," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "You are acting like he robbed you at gunpoint. It is just a piece of paper. We have done so much for you over the years, and the one time your sister needs a tiny bit of leverage, you threaten to send her husband to prison. It is disgusting." "Done so much for me?" I asked. "Like what, Mom? Name one single thing you have done for me that did not come with a price tag." "We let you live in our basement during your freshman year of college." She fired back instantly, her eyes narrowing. "You charged me $800 a month in rent," I reminded her. "I worked 3 jobs just to pay you while Natalie lived in the master suite upstairs for free." Because Natalie was delicate, my father interjected, his face still flushed with anger. "She needed a stable environment to thrive. You were always the tough one. You could handle it. We pushed you because we knew you could take it. We built your character. You are acting like we left you out in the cold. We fed you. We clothed you. We paid for your braces when you were 12. My mother was now weaponizing basic parental obligations as if they were extraordinary acts of charity. "We gave you a perfect life in the suburbs. And now, when your sister's husband has a brilliant opportunity to secure their financial freedom, you want to ruin it over a technicality. You are ungrateful, Olivia. You have always been cold and ungrateful." "A technicality?" I practically screamed. "Mom, identity theft is not a technicality. Kendrick used my clean background to bypass the bank's security protocols. This is wire fraud. If Kendrick defaults on $300,000, the bank will not care about family loyalty. They will garnish my wages. They will seize my bank accounts. They will destroy my credit rating. I will not be able to rent an apartment, buy a car, or get a job in the financial sector ever again. He risked my entire future. Then Kendrick will not default." My father yelled, completely dismissing the law. "He is a smart kid. He has a plan. People bend the rules in business every single day. That is how the real world works. You just do not understand high-level finance because you were just a mid-level employee who got fired. Kendrick is playing in the big leagues." At this point, Natalie collapsed dramatically against Kendrick's chest, sobbing so loudly it echoed in the large room. "She hates me," Natalie wailed, her voice muffled against his designer sweatshirt. "She has always hated me, Mom. She is just doing this because she is jealous that I found a real man who takes care of me while she is stuck with a broke nurse who cannot even buy her a decent ring." My mother's eyes snapped toward Liam. He had remained a quiet, steady presence by my side, never raising his voice, never taking the bait. His calm demeanor seemed to infuriate my mother more than my shouting. She could not stand that he was not intimidated by their wealth or their volume. "And you," my mother sneered, pointing a perfectly manicured finger right at Liam's chest. "You are just standing there letting her tear this family apart. What kind of man are you? You come into my beautiful home, drink my sparkling water, and stand around while my daughter disrespects her own flesh and blood. If you two are going to stay here and freeload while she is unemployed, you are going to make yourself useful." Liam did not blink. "How can I help, Brenda?" he asked politely. "The landscaping crew canceled on us this morning," my mother snapped. "The backyard is a mess, and we have important guests arriving for our anniversary dinner party tonight. If you want to stand in my house, you need to earn your keep. Go outside, find the mower in the shed, and cut the grass. Then edge the walkways. Do not come back inside until it is pristine." "Are you out of your mind?" I demanded, stepping in front of Liam. "He is a guest. He is an emergency room nurse who just worked a 14-hour shift. He is not your gardener." If he does not like it, he can leave, my father barked. Both of you can leave. But if you walk out that door, Olivia, do not ever come back. You either support this family or you are dead to us. I opened my mouth to tell them we were leaving permanently, but Liam gently placed a warm hand on my shoulder. I turned to look at him. His expression was completely peaceful. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet, grounded strength. "It is okay, Olivia," Liam said softly, his voice a soothing contrast to the screaming match. "I do not mind. Some fresh air will be nice. Let me take care of the yard." Liam. "No," I whispered. "You do not have to do this. They are treating you like dirt." "I know," he replied, giving me a small, reassuring smile. "But I want to. Just give me a few minutes." Before I could argue further, Kendrick let out a loud, mocking laugh. He patted Natalie's shoulder and stepped forward, walking aggressively toward the kitchen to get another drink. As he passed by us, he deliberately shoved his shoulder hard into Liam's chest. It was a cheap schoolyard bully tactic meant to provoke a fight. Liam merely shifted his weight, absorbing the impact without stumbling. But the force of the shove caused Kendrick's jacket to swing open. A heavy premium metal business card slipped out of his inner breast pocket. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, distinctive clink that sounded completely different from a normal paper card. Kendrick did not even notice he had dropped it. He just kept walking, swaggering into the kitchen while my parents rushed over to comfort a still sobbing Natalie. I looked down at the floor. The metal card gleamed under the recessed lighting. I knelt down and picked it up. The material was cold and heavy in my hand. It was a very specific custom-milled titanium card. I turned it over to look at the engraved logo. The words were etched in sharp, minimalist silver lettering. Apex Capital Ventures. My heart completely stopped. My eyes widened as the letters burned into my brain. I ran my thumb over the raised silver font, a chilling realization washing over me. I knew that logo. I knew the exact weight of that titanium card. I knew the corporate address printed on the back. Kendrick had not just scammed a random bank. He had secured his fraudulent loan from Apex Capital. Apex Capital Ventures. I stared at the etched silver lettering, the cold, heavy metal warming against my palm. 6 months ago, my financial technology conglomerate had finalized the acquisition of Apex Capital. It was a highly respected boutique venture firm we had absorbed to expand our commercial lending portfolio. We had spent millions upgrading their security algorithms. And somehow Kendrick had managed to slip a fraudulent application through their legacy systems during the migration phase, using my immaculate credit profile as his shield. He had not just robbed a faceless corporate bank, he had robbed my company. He had effectively stolen my money from my own corporate vault. A slow, chilling realization washed over me, replacing my anger with an intense, terrifying calm. Leaving right now would be the easiest thing to do in the world. I could walk out that front door, call my legal team, and have Kendrick arrested by federal agents before Monday morning. But looking around this pristine, fake living room, I realized that would be entirely too kind. They needed to experience the consequences of their actions in front of an audience. They cared about their social image more than anything else in the entire world. So I was going to sit back and let them completely destroy it. I slipped the titanium card deep into my jacket pocket. I took a deep breath, smoothing out the front of my shirt, and walked right past the front door. Instead of leaving my parents' home like I had threatened, I moved to the furthest corner of the sprawling living room and sat down gracefully on a dark velvet accent chair. My mother, who was busy fixing her lipstick in the hallway mirror, paused and glared at me through the reflection. "What are you doing?" she demanded sharply. "I thought I told you to leave if you could not be supportive of your sister." I crossed my legs and gave her a tight, polite smile. "You were right, Mom. We are family. I should not let a little misunderstanding ruin your 20th anniversary dinner party. I am going to stay and celebrate with you." My father grunted his approval from the kitchen, clearly thinking he had won the argument and put me in my place. Natalie just sniffled and glared at me from the kitchen island, clinging tightly to Kendrick's arm, as if I might attack him. Kendrick flashed me a triumphant, arrogant grin, entirely mistaking my silence for submission. Out the large glass window, I could see Liam diligently pushing a heavy lawnmower across the overgrown backyard, playing his part perfectly. He knew exactly what he was doing. Within 20 minutes, the doorbell began to ring continuously. Brenda's superficial country club friends arrived in loud waves, filling the condo with the overwhelming scent of expensive perfumes and the echoing chatter of hollow compliments. There was the president of the local homeowners association, a retired plastic surgeon, and several wealthy wives who spent their days organizing charity galas they barely understood. They glided into the room wearing tailored designer dresses, carrying bottles of vintage wine, immediately kissing my mother on both cheeks. "Oh, Brenda, the condo looks absolutely stunning." As always, one woman gushed, adjusting a massive diamond tennis necklace. "And Richard, you have not aged a single day." My parents ate up the praise hungrily, completely ignoring the massive reality that they were 90 days behind on their mortgage and drowning in secondary debt. They played the role of the affluent, successful couple with frightening ease. The catering staff arrived shortly after, carrying silver trays of caviar and truffle crostinis, setting up a lavish spread that my parents absolutely could not afford. I sat quietly in my dimly lit corner, watching the theatrical performance unfold. A hired waiter handed me a glass of dark red wine, and I settled back into the velvet chair to watch the show. It did not take long for my mother to gather the guests in the center of the room to parade her prized possessions. "Everyone, please, come say hello to Natalie and Kendrick," Brenda announced happily, her voice ringing clear over the soft jazz music playing from the ceiling speakers. The wealthy guests swarmed around them. Kendrick puffed out his chest, shaking hands firmly and flashing his signature arrogant smile. Natalie beamed beside him, playing the role of the devoted wealthy wife to absolute perfection. Kendrick just secured a massive round of funding for his new financial technology venture. My father boasted loudly, slapping his son-in-law heavily on the back. $300,000 in pure capital. The boy is an absolute genius. We are looking at the next big tech billionaire right here in our own living room. The guests gasped and applauded politely. "Oh, how wonderful," a woman wearing a green silk dress cooed loudly. "You must be so proud of them, Richard. It is so rare to see young people with such drive these days." "What exactly does your company do, Kendrick?" Kendrick smoothly launched into a rapid string of meaningless corporate buzzwords. "We are leveraging decentralized blockchain architecture to optimize peer-to-peer asset management," he lied effortlessly to the room. "It is highly disruptive technology. The institutional investors at Apex Capital practically begged to fund us." I took a slow sip of my wine, savoring the bitter taste. Apex Capital did not beg anyone. Their automated system simply processed a forged document. It was incredibly difficult to sit there and listen to a man boast about stealing from my company, to a room full of people who thought he was a prodigy. As Kendrick continued to spin his web of lies, promising ridiculous financial returns to anyone who invested in his fake token, the guests hung on to his every single word. Meanwhile, nobody offered me a seat closer to the center of the room. Nobody offered me an appetizer. I was the dark stain on their perfect evening, the outcast daughter who simply did not fit into their carefully curated aesthetic. I watched Liam through the sliding glass door. He had finished mowing and was now meticulously edging the stone walkway. He looked up, caught my eye through the glass, and offered a subtle, encouraging nod. Finally, the woman in the green silk dress noticed me sitting alone in the shadows. She squinted, leaning closer to my mother. "Brenda, is that Olivia sitting over there in the dark?" the woman asked, her voice carrying across the quiet hum of the room. "I have not seen her in ages. How is her little corporate job going?" The entire room turned to look at me. Natalie smirked. Kendrick crossed his arms, waiting eagerly for the humiliation. My mother let out a loud theatrical sigh that was designed to draw maximum pity from her captive audience. She shook her head sadly, placing a dramatic hand over her heart. "Oh, let us not talk about that right now," my mother said, projecting her voice so every single person in the room could hear her perfectly. "Poor Olivia was just fired from her job this morning. She completely lost her position. She has absolutely no income now. It is tragic, really, but you know how she has always struggled to apply herself. We are just letting her stay here tonight because she is relying on our charity at this point. She cannot even afford to pay her own bills. The guests murmured in collective sympathy, casting pitying, judgmental glances my way. It was the ultimate social execution. My mother had successfully elevated Natalie by completely stepping on my neck. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I looked at the crowd of wealthy socialites, my gloating sister, my arrogant brother-in-law, and my beaming parents. I simply offered a warm, relaxed smile, raised my glass to my mother, and took a long, slow sip of my wine. As the evening progressed, the catering staff ushered everyone into the formal dining room. The long mahogany table was set to perfection with fine china crystal goblets and towering floral centerpieces that made it difficult to see the person sitting across from you. My parents naturally took the heads of the table. Kendrick and Natalie were seated in the places of honor right next to my father. I was banished to the very end of the table, seated next to the kitchen door, where the waitstaff rushed back and forth. I did not mind the seating arrangement. It gave me the perfect vantage point to watch the disaster unfold. Halfway through the main course of roasted lamb and truffle potatoes, my father tapped his silver fork against his crystal wine glass. The sharp, ringing sound brought the quiet chatter to a halt. My father stood up, beaming with pride as he gestured toward Kendrick. "I want to take a moment to celebrate family," my father announced, his voice thick with unearned arrogance. "As many of you know, my son-in-law Kendrick is doing some incredible things in the financial technology space. He is pushing boundaries. I think we would all love to hear a little bit more about this revolutionary project of yours, Kendrick." Kendrick did not even try to look humble. He stood up, smoothing the front of his designer shirt, and flashed a brilliant, practiced smile at the wealthy guests. He locked eyes with an older gentleman named Dr. Harrison, a retired surgeon who was known around the country club for making reckless angel investments. "Thank you," Richard Kendrick began, projecting his voice with the confidence of a seasoned con artist. "The future of wealth generation is changing. Traditional banking is dead. What my team and I have developed is a decentralized ecosystem built on a proprietary blockchain. We are minting a utility token that completely eliminates the middleman in peer-to-peer asset transfers. It is highly scalable, it is entirely frictionless, and the yield farming potential for early adopters is astronomical." Dr. Harrison leaned forward, looking intrigued. "Yield farming, you say? And what kind of returns are we projecting for the first quarter?" Kendrick did not miss a beat. "For our seed investors, we are easily looking at a 400% annual percentage yield. The smart contracts are locked in, and the tokenomics are designed to trigger a massive supply shock. It is virtually risk-free." A few guests murmured in awe. My mother looked like she might burst with pride. Natalie was practically glowing. I set my fork down silently. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin. I looked directly down the length of the table at my brother-in-law. "A 400% yield?" I asked, my voice carrying effortlessly over the quiet room. "That is incredible, Kendrick. But I am curious. What consensus mechanism is your proprietary blockchain using to prevent a 51% attack? Are you utilizing proof of work or proof of stake?" The entire table went dead silent. The guest turned to look at me, surprised that the supposedly unemployed, disgraced daughter was speaking up. Kendrick's confident smile faltered. His eyes darted nervously for a fraction of a second. "Well," Kendrick stammered, slightly clearing his throat, "we are utilizing a hybrid model. It is highly technical. I do not want to bore everyone at the dinner table with the coding specifics." "It is not boring at all," I replied, keeping my tone bright and relentlessly polite. "I think anyone considering an investment would want to know the infrastructure. Since you are promising a massive supply shock, how exactly is your liquidity pool structured? Are the developer wallets time-locked, or can your team liquidate their tokens on day one and rug pull the investors?" Kendrick's face flushed a deep, uncomfortable red. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, a bead of sweat visibly forming on his forehead. He had memorized buzzwords, but he had absolutely no idea how the actual architecture of digital finance worked. He was entirely out of his depth, drowning in front of the exact people he was trying to scam. "Listen," Olivia Kendrick said, his voice taking on a defensive-aggressive edge. "The liquidity is secure. We have top-tier developers handling the back end." "But are you registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission?" I pressed, not giving him a single inch to breathe. "Because offering a guaranteed 400% return on a digital asset classifies your token as a security. If you have not filed a Form D with the SEC, soliciting investments at this table is currently a federal offense. So have you filed the paperwork, Kendrick?" Kendrick was practically panting now. He looked at my father for help, his eyes wide with panic. The wealthy guests were no longer looking at him with admiration. Dr. Harrison frowned, crossing his arms and leaning back in his chair, suddenly looking extremely skeptical. "That is quite enough, Olivia," my mother snapped, slamming her hand down on the table. "How dare you? Your brother-in-law is sharing his success, and you are sitting there throwing out ridiculous questions just to make him look bad. You are doing this because you are bitter. You lost your job today, so you want to ruin his moment. It is pathetic." My father glared at me furiously. "Apologize to Kendrick right now, Olivia. You know nothing about this industry. You were just a corporate drone. Do not embarrass yourself any further." I did not apologize. I just sat there maintaining my calm, unbothered smile. I waited. I knew exactly what Kendrick would do next. Cornered animals always lash out with their biggest weapon to regain dominance. Kendrick wiped his forehead with his napkin. He stood up a little straighter, puffing his chest out again, as he looked around at the doubting guests. "You want to talk about legitimacy?" Kendrick practically shouted, his voice cracking slightly with desperation. "You think I am running a scam? Well, let me tell you something, Olivia. My project was just fully vetted and financially backed by Apex Capital Ventures. They are one of the most ruthless, exclusive venture capital firms in the country. They analyzed every single line of my code and every detail of my business plan. And this morning, they wired $300,000 of institutional funding directly into my corporate account. They believe in my vision." The guests gasped collectively. The heavy skepticism in the room vanished instantly, replaced by a wave of impressed murmurs. In the financial world, the name Apex Capital carried immense weight. Dr. Harrison uncrossed his arms, his eyes lighting up with renewed interest. If Apex Capital was in the project, had to be a guaranteed goldmine. Natalie glared at me triumphantly from across the table. "See, Olivia, you have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. Kendrick is backed by billionaires. You are just a jealous loser." My mother laughed haughtily, raising her wineglass to the guests. "Let us toast to Kendrick and his incredible institutional backing," she announced proudly. The table erupted into applause. Glasses clinked together. Kendrick soaked in the admiration, shooting me a look of pure venomous victory. He thought he had won. He thought naming my own company had silenced me for good. I smiled warmly at him. I did not say another word. Instead, I quietly reached into my pocket under the table and pulled out my phone. I opened my encrypted messaging app and selected the contact for my chief legal officer. I typed out a single precise sentence. "Execute the fraud protocol for the Kendrick loan. Immediately involve federal authorities." I hit send. I slid the phone back into my pocket, picked up my fork, and casually took another bite of my dinner. The countdown had officially begun. The sliding glass door from the patio opened with a soft sliding click that barely registered over the classical music playing in the background. Liam stepped inside, bringing a faint, crisp breeze of the cool Chicago evening with him. He walked straight through the pristine kitchen, stopping at the marble sink to thoroughly wash his hands. He scrubbed away the dirt from my mother's garden, dried his hands on a linen towel, rolled down the sleeves of his simple button-down shirt, and walked quietly into the formal dining room. He did not ask for a chair. He did not try to squeeze into the crowded, opulent table where my family held court. Instead, he walked straight over to my secluded corner and stood directly behind my velvet seat. He rested one warm, steady hand on my shoulder. The physical contact was incredibly grounding, a quiet anchor in a room full of absolute delusion. I leaned into his touch for a brief second. The wealthy guests across the table immediately stopped their fawning over Kendrick and turned their collective attention to Liam. Their gazes were heavy, judgmental, and entirely unapologetic. They looked at his practical work boots, his generic denim jeans, and his unremarkable shirt, completely dismissing him as a human being. A woman sitting near the center of the table, dripping in heavy pearl jewelry, leaned over to my mother. She whispered loudly enough for the sound to carry over the roast lamb. She asked if the hired yard boy was supposed to be standing in the formal dining room during dinner. My mother just sighed dramatically, rubbing her temples as if dealing with a massive headache. She shot Liam a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. She muttered to her friend that he was just my unfortunate baggage and emergency room nurse with no ambition who was dragging her eldest daughter down into poverty. Liam heard every single word. He ignored them completely. He looked at the extravagant spread of food, the expensive crystal, and the fake smiles, then looked down at me. His face remained a mask of polite indifference. He was entirely unbothered by the opinions of people he did not respect. Sensing that the attention had momentarily shifted away from her husband, Natalie quickly grabbed her crystal champagne flute. She stood up, tapping her silver spoon against the delicate glass. The sharp, high-pitched ringing sound instantly commanded the room, forcing all eyes back to the golden child. "I want to propose a toast," Natalie announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She smiled brightly at the sea of expectant faces, playing the role of the perfect supportive wife. "To my incredible husband Kendrick, you have worked so hard to build this crypto hedge fund from the ground up. You are a true visionary and a financial genius. Seeing a powerhouse institutional lender like Apex Capital validate your brilliance today just proves what I have always known. You are the future of this family, and you are carrying us all into a new era of wealth." The guests murmured their eager agreement, raising their wine glasses into the air. Kendrick puffed his chest out, basking in the glory, nodding graciously at the table. But Natalie was not finished. She turned her gaze directly toward me. Her bright smile twisted into something venomous and cruel, perfectly hidden under the guise of sisterly concern. "And I also want to make a special toast to my older sister, Olivia," Natalie continued. She paused, letting the silence hang heavy and suffocating in the dining room. "We all know you hit rock bottom today. Losing your job and having your entire corporate career fail must be absolutely devastating. It is hard to watch you struggle. But I want you to know that Kendrick and I forgive you for your jealous outburst earlier. We know you were just lashing out from a place of deep insecurity and financial panic. Even though you have nothing right now and you are completely dependent on mom and dad to keep a roof over your head, we still love you. We will pray that you eventually find your footing again, however long that takes." It was a masterful performance of manipulation. She painted herself as the gracious, successful saint while burying me alive in front of Chicago's elite. My parents beamed at her, overwhelmed by her supposed emotional maturity. The guests gave me looks of profound pity mixed with sheer distaste, looking at me as if financial failure was a contagious disease they might catch if they breathed the same air. I did not break eye contact with Natalie. I did not cry, and I did not defend myself. I slowly reached into my lap, unlocked my phone screen, and tapped the voice memo application. I hit the red record button, resting the device discreetly against my linen napkin. I raised my own glass of cheap red wine. "Thank you, Natalie," I said clearly, making sure my phone microphone captured every single syllable. "I appreciate your sympathy. And Kendrick, just so everyone at this table is entirely clear, you are actively taking on new investors for this blockchain project tonight. The one backed by the $300,000 commercial loan from Apex Capital Ventures." Kendrick practically lunged at the bait, eager to secure Dr. Harrison's retirement money. "Absolutely," Kendrick boasted loudly, his voice echoing perfectly into my hidden recording. "Apex Capital gave us the institutional runway we needed. Now we are opening the door for private seed capital. A $50,000 minimum buy-in guarantees a 400% return by the end of the fiscal year. My smart contracts are bulletproof. You literally cannot lose your money." I smiled, letting the recording run for another 5 seconds to capture the guests murmuring their approval. Then I quietly stopped the recording and saved the audio file directly to my secure cloud server. He had just solicited unregistered securities across state lines and publicly admitted to possessing the fraudulent Apex funds. The trap was not just set, it had completely snapped shut around his ankle, breaking the bone. My father proudly raised his glass to seal the toast. To family and to immense success, my father cheered loudly. The wealthy guests echoed his sentiment, a chorus of clinking crystal and cheerful laughter filling the dining room. Kendrick took a massive gulp of his expensive champagne, looking like a king sitting upon an untouchable throne. But before anyone could take another bite of their extravagant dinner, the cheerful atmosphere was violently shattered. It was not the soft, melodic chime of the condo doorbell. It was a heavy, aggressive, authoritative knock at the solid mahogany front door. The sound boomed through the hallway. It sounded like someone was ready to break the wood right off its expensive hinges. The knocking continued, louder and more insistent this time. My mother huffed, slamming her linen napkin down onto the table in extreme annoyance. "Who on earth could that be?" My mother complained, her voice tight with irritation. "The caterers are already here. If that is the building manager complaining about the noise, I am going to have him fired by the condo board tomorrow morning." She pushed her chair back, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor as she marched out of the dining room and down the long hallway toward the foyer. The guests at the table murmured in confusion, setting their wine glasses down. Kendrick tried to maintain his confident posture, but I saw his jaw tighten. Liam stood perfectly still behind me, his hand never leaving my shoulder. From my seat at the end of the table, I had a clear line of sight straight down the hallway to the front entryway. I watched my mother grab the brass door handle and yank the heavy door open, an angry reprimand already forming on her lips. "Excuse me, do you have any idea what time it is?" my mother snapped. She did not get to finish her sentence. Two tall men in dark, immaculate suits stepped forward, effectively forcing my mother to take a startled step backward into the condo. They did not look like building management. They did not look like security. They had the cold, unyielding posture of people who possessed absolute authority. The first man, who had silver hair and a sharp, angular face, reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a heavy gold badge that caught the light of the crystal chandelier in the foyer. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division." The silver-haired agent stated, his voice completely flat and devoid of any polite warmth. "Are you Brenda Brooks, the registered owner of this residence?" My mother visibly recoiled, all the color instantly draining from her face. Her arrogant demeanor vanished in a millisecond, replaced by genuine shock. "Yes," she stammered, her voice suddenly small and trembling. "I am Brenda. But there must be some kind of mistake. We are hosting a private anniversary dinner." The second agent, a younger man with broad shoulders, stepped past my mother and looked directly down the hallway, his eyes scanning the crowded dining room. "We apologize for the interruption, ma'am," the younger agent said, though he did not sound apologetic at all. "But this is not a social visit. We are looking for an individual named Kendrick. We have reason to believe he is currently on these premises." The silence that fell over the dining room was absolute and suffocating. The cheerful chatter, the clinking of expensive silverware, and the soft jazz music all seemed to evaporate. Every single wealthy guest froze in their seat. Dr. Harrison slowly lowered his wine glass to the table, his eyes darting suspiciously toward Kendrick. Kendrick was sitting frozen at the head of the table. He looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His confident swagger was completely gone. His skin turned a sickly shade of gray, and a visible bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He slowly lowered his hands to his lap, making himself as small as possible. My father stood up from his chair, trying to salvage the situation, using his usual bluster. "Now hold on just a minute," my father projected, walking toward the hallway to intercept the agents. "I am Richard Brooks. I own this home. You cannot just barge into my private property during a family celebration and start interrogating my son-in-law. Do you have a warrant? I know the police commissioner personally." The silver-haired agent did not flinch. He looked at my father with the mild boredom of a man who dealt with arrogant, wealthy criminals every single day of his life. "We do not need a warrant to knock on your door and ask questions, Mr. Brooks," the agent replied coldly. But we do have a federal subpoena for the electronic devices located in this residence. We are investigating a massive case of corporate wire fraud. At 9 o'clock this morning, a fraudulent commercial loan application was processed, resulting in the illegal transfer of $300,000 from Apex Capital Ventures into a private checking account registered to this address. The collective gasp from the dining table was audible. The guests turned to look at Kendrick in absolute horror. The brilliant tech entrepreneur they had just been applauding was suddenly the target of a federal fraud investigation. The woman in the green silk dress quietly pushed her chair back, distancing herself from the table as if Kendrick was suddenly radioactive. Dr. Harrison looked absolutely furious, realizing he had almost handed his retirement funds over to a con artist. My father stopped dead in his tracks. His mouth opened and closed silently like a fish out of water. He looked back at Kendrick, then back at the federal agents, completely unable to process the reality crashing down around him. Kendrick, my father choked out, his voice barely a whisper. What is going on? Tell them there is a misunderstanding. Tell them your investors approved the transfer. Kendrick opened his mouth to speak, but only a pathetic squeak came out. He was completely paralyzed by fear. He looked at the agents standing in the hallway, their hands resting casually near their holstered weapons, and he realized his web of lies had completely unraveled. There was no pitch deck that could save him from the FBI. Natalie, however, did not freeze. The golden child who had spent her entire life manipulating situations to avoid taking responsibility went into absolute survival mode. She saw her lavish lifestyle, her expensive wedding ring, and her perfect social image burning to the ground. She knew exactly what she had done with my social security number, and she knew the federal government was about to find out. Natalie shot up from her chair so fast it tipped backward and crashed onto the floor. She ignored her husband entirely. She pointed a shaking, manicured finger straight down the length of the table, aiming directly at my face. It was her. Natalie screamed, her voice echoing hysterically off the high ceilings. It was Olivia. The entire room whipped their heads around to stare at me. I remained perfectly seated, my hands folded neatly in my lap. She did it. Natalie continued to shriek, her face completely flushed with desperate tears. She lost her corporate job today. She came here begging us for money. She is completely broke and desperate to pay her rent. She must have hacked into that Apex Capital system and stolen the money using our address to frame my husband. She is a criminal. Arrest her. She stole the money. My mother, still standing in the foyer, immediately latched onto the lie to save her precious reputation. Yes, my mother yelled, pointing at me as well. She has always been jealous of Kendrick's success. She is an unemployed failure. It makes perfect sense. She is the one you are looking for. The two federal agents slowly walked into the dining room, their heavy footsteps echoing against the hardwood. They looked at the hysterical crying sister, the panicked parents, and the sweating brother-in-law. Then they turned their attention to the far end of the table, fixing their intense gaze directly on me. I felt the heavy scrutiny of the two federal agents from across the dining room. Their eyes locked onto me with the sharp, calculating intensity of men who spent their lives dissecting lies. But before they could even take a single step toward my corner of the table, my father eagerly threw me directly to the wolves. He did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. The instinct to protect his fake social empire was far stronger than any shred of paternal loyalty he might have possessed. Officers, please listen to me, my father pleaded, adopting a sickeningly fake tone of deep parental sorrow. He walked toward the silver-haired agent, holding his hands up as if he were a completely cooperative and innocent bystander. You have to understand the family dynamics at play here. That woman sitting at the end of the table is my eldest daughter, Olivia. I hate to say this to law enforcement, but she has been struggling with severe mental instability for years. She has a history of erratic behavior and massive financial irresponsibility. The silver-haired agent stopped scanning the room and looked at my father, his expression completely unreadable. Go on, the agent instructed coldly. My father took a deep breath, looking around at his wealthy friends to ensure they were buying his performance. She just lost her entry-level corporate job this morning. My father lied effortlessly. She came to our home today completely broke, begging us to pay her rent and cover her massive credit card debts. When we refused to enable her poor life choices, she became incredibly hostile. If anyone hacked into a financial institution and orchestrated a fraudulent wire transfer today, it was absolutely her. She is desperate for cash and completely unhinged. My mother immediately rushed to my father's side, placing a dramatic hand on his shoulder to present a united front of parental grief. "It is a tragedy," my mother chimed in, her voice trembling with perfectly manufactured emotion. "We have tried everything to help her over the years, but she has always been fiercely jealous of our son-in-law. Kendrick is a brilliant entrepreneur. He is building a massive hedge fund, and Olivia simply cannot stand to see him succeed while she fails. She must have used our home internet address to frame him out of pure spite. You have to arrest her. Please get her out of my house so we can continue our peaceful anniversary dinner." I sat perfectly still, listening to the two people who brought me into this world actively try to send me to federal prison just to save their own embarrassing social status. The sheer magnitude of their betrayal was staggering, yet I did not feel a single ounce of sadness. I only felt a cold, sharp clarity. The final thread connecting me to this family snapped completely, and it was the most liberating feeling I had ever experienced in my entire life. At the head of the table, Kendrick visibly deflated with profound relief. He wiped a thick layer of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and nodded vigorously, desperately clinging to the lifeline my parents had just thrown him. "That is right," Kendrick stammered, his voice still shaking slightly. "I left my laptop open on the kitchen island earlier today. She must have copied my business files and initiated the transfer while I was in the other room. I am the victim here. She stole my identity to rob that company." Natalie continued to sob loudly, burying her face into Kendrick's designer sweatshirt, playing the traumatized wife to absolute perfection. The two federal agents stood in silence, absorbing the chaotic scene. They were highly trained professionals who investigated sophisticated financial crimes for a living. They looked at Kendrick, who was sweating profusely, stammering and shaking like a leaf. They looked at Natalie, who was putting on a theatrical crying display without shedding a single real tear. They looked at my parents, who were speaking far too quickly and offering up elaborate motives without even being asked. Then the silver-haired agent turned his gaze back to me. I was sitting quietly in the dimly lit corner. I had not shouted. I had not cried. I had not desperately pleaded my innocence. I simply sat there, casually holding a glass of red wine with Liam standing solidly behind me like a quiet, impenetrable wall. The stark contrast between my absolute calm and my family's frantic hysteria clearly confused the seasoned investigators. Their narrative simply did not match the reality of the room. The younger agent remained stationed by the front door, blocking the only exit. The silver-haired agent slowly walked down the length of the long mahogany dining table. The wealthy country club guests shrank back into their chairs as he passed, desperate to avoid making eye contact with federal law enforcement. The expensive catered food was growing cold on the plates, the grand anniversary celebration entirely forgotten. The agent stopped when he reached my end of the table. He looked down at me, his sharp eyes analyzing my relaxed posture, my steady breathing, and the completely unbothered expression on my face. "Ma'am," the agent said, his voice firm and commanding, "your family is making some very serious allegations against you regarding a major cybercrime and the theft of $300,000. I need you to stand up, step away from the table, and provide your government-issued identification right now." My mother let out a loud, triumphant scoff from the hallway. "See," my mother announced to her friends. "I told you she was nothing but trouble." I did not rush. I slowly set my wine glass down onto the crisp white tablecloth. I picked up my plain leather purse from the floor next to my chair. I stood up gracefully, smoothing out the front of my jacket. Liam stepped back just slightly to give me room, his eyes locked onto the agent, ensuring the man maintained a respectful distance. I unzipped my purse, reached inside, and pulled out my leather wallet. I extracted my driver's license and held it out. The agent took the plastic card from my hand. He looked down at the name printed on the ID, then pulled a secure federal mobile device from his inside jacket pocket. He typed my full name and details into his encrypted database to pull up my background check, and cross-referenced the information with the active fraud case file he had been briefed on. The dining room was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning unit. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the federal agent to pull out a pair of steel handcuffs and drag me out the front door. Kendrick was practically grinning now, his arrogant swagger slowly returning, as he believed he had successfully pinned his massive federal felony on his supposedly broke sister-in-law. The silver-haired agent stared at the screen of his device for several long seconds. He read the secure dossier that populated under my name. He blinked once, his brow furrowing in genuine shock. He read the screen a second time just to be absolutely sure he was not making a catastrophic mistake. Slowly, the agent lowered his device. The cold interrogative hardness entirely vanished from his face. His rigid posture shifted instantly, dropping the aggressive stance of a law enforcement officer confronting a suspect. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of profound surprise and deep professional respect. He stood up, perfectly straight, cleared his throat, and handed my driver's license back to me, using both hands. "Ms. Brooks," the agent said, his voice ringing loud and clear across the dead-silent dining room, "my sincere apologies for the aggressive approach. The precinct simply dispatched us to secure the suspect at this address. They did not inform me that the chief executive officer of the parent company was personally on site for this fraud case." The words hung in the air of the dining room like a physical weight. The chief executive officer. The silver-haired agent had spoken with such absolute certainty, such deep professional deference, that there was no room left for doubt or misinterpretation. My father dropped his wine glass. It hit the hardwood floor, shattering into dozens of sharp crystal pieces, the dark red liquid pooling around his expensive Italian leather shoes. He did not even look down. He just stared at me, his mouth hanging open, his face completely devoid of color. My mother took a step backward, bumping into the foyer console table. She gripped the edge of it with white knuckles, her perfectly manicured fingernails digging into the wood. The wealthy country club guests, who just moments ago had been looking at me with profound pity and disgust, were now staring at me in absolute shock. Dr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, his eyes darting between me and the federal agents, rapidly recalculating the entire power dynamic of the room. I stood quietly at the end of the long mahogany table. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice. I looked directly at Kendrick, who was currently gripping the edge of the dining table so hard his forearms were shaking. "You heard him correctly," I said, my voice calm and steady, cutting through the suffocating silence. 6 months ago, my financial technology conglomerate finalized the acquisition of Apex Capital Ventures. It was a strategic buyout to integrate their commercial lending portfolio into our blockchain security infrastructure. I am the founder, the majority shareholder, and the acting CEO. I currently take home a salary and dividend package of approximately $300,000 every single month. I never lost my job today. I own the entire company. Natalie let out a strange, choked gasp. She looked at my plain jacket, my simple shoes, and the 12-year-old Toyota parked in the driveway. The cognitive dissonance was breaking her brain. She could not comprehend how someone making $300,000 a month would willingly let themselves be treated like a second-class citizen in this house. "That is impossible," Natalie whispered, her voice cracking violently. "You are lying. You drive a piece of junk car. You do not wear designer clothes. You are just saying this to save yourself." I smiled warmly at my sister. "Wealth is quiet, Natalie. Only people who are desperately trying to prove their worth feel the need to wear their bank accounts on their sleeves. I hid my financial status because I knew exactly what you and our parents would do if you found out. You would drain me dry. And considering the events of today, I was entirely correct." Kendrick suddenly let out a loud, forced laugh. It was a manic, desperate sound that echoed awkwardly across the dining room. He clapped his hands together, looking around at the guests and the federal agents, as if this was all a highly coordinated joke. "Oh, I get it," Kendrick said, his voice pitched far too high. "This is a prank. You hired these guys, did you not, Olivia? You got some actors to come in here and mess with us because you were mad about the car wash comment. That is a good one. You really had us going for a second there." The silver-haired agent did not find it funny. He stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Sir, impersonating a federal officer is a felony. I assure you my badge is real and the federal subpoena in my vehicle is very real. Kendrick swallowed hard, his fake smile collapsing entirely. I turned my attention back to him, pulling my phone from my pocket and opening the secure dossier my legal team had just forwarded to me. Let us talk about your brilliant business plan, Kendrick, I said, reading directly from the glowing screen. At 9:14 this morning, an application was submitted to the Apex Capital Automated Lending Portal. The application used my exact social security number, my credit history, and my spotless financial background as the primary guarantor. But it gets much worse for you. You did not just borrow my name, you submitted falsified collateral documents. I looked up from the screen, making sure Dr. Harrison and every other potential investor in the room was listening closely. You claim to possess $2.5 million in secure blockchain assets? I continued, my voice unwavering. But the wallet addresses you provided in the official federal loan documents are entirely empty. They are dummy accounts. You also listed this exact condo as secondary physical collateral, claiming you had equity in the property. You do not own this property. That is 2 separate counts of wire fraud plus identity theft. And just to completely eliminate any shadow of a doubt, our cybersecurity division pulled the IP address of the device used to submit the application. I read the string of numbers aloud, letting them echo in the quiet room. That IP address belongs to the wireless router sitting in the living room of this exact condo, I stated. The metadata on the digital signature matches the MAC address of the laptop currently sitting open on the kitchen island. The laptop registered to you, Kendrick. You left a digital footprint so wide and so obvious that our automated security system flagged it within 4 hours of the funds being transferred. You are not a financial genius. You are a remarkably sloppy criminal who tried to rob the bank owned by his own sister-in-law. Kendrick collapsed backward into his dining chair. His legs simply gave out. He buried his face in his hands, letting out a pathetic whimpering sound. He had no defense. He had no lies left to spin. The federal agents had everything they needed to put him in a federal penitentiary for the next decade. The absolute reality of the situation finally crashed down upon my parents. The illusion of Kendrick the billionaire was completely dead and gone. But more importantly, a new reality had just presented itself to my mother. Her eldest daughter, the one she had abused, neglected, and publicly humiliated for decades, was a multimillionaire. I was the wealthiest person she had ever met in her entire life. I watched my mother's face undergo a terrifying transformation. The shock and horror melted away, replaced by a sudden, ravenous gleam in her eyes. She looked at me not with apology or remorse, but with the calculating greed of a predator who had just spotted an endless feast. She stepped over the shattered crystal wineglass on the floor, completely ignoring my father, and rushed toward me with her arms outstretched. "Oh, darling," my mother cried out, her voice suddenly dripping with thick, sugary affection. A massive smile broke across her face, completely erasing the cruel sneer she had worn just moments ago. "My brilliant, wonderful daughter, I always knew you were destined for absolute greatness. We are so incredibly proud of you." She stopped just a few feet away from me, blocked by Liam, who had subtly shifted his stance to prevent her from touching me. My mother did not even seem to notice him. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest, her eyes wide and pleading. "Listen, Olivia." My mother said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is actually a blessing in disguise. If you own the company and you are the one in charge, then there is absolutely no problem here. You have the power to fix this right now. Just tell these nice officers that it was all a big misunderstanding. Erase the loan from your computer system. Forgive the debt. We have to protect Kendrick for Natalie's sake. We can just keep all of this money right here in the family. Keep it in the family." I repeated, my voice dropping to a low, icy register that made my mother flinch. "Mom, do you have any concept of how the United States financial system actually operates? I run a regulated corporate entity, not a personal piggy bank. We are audited by the Securities and Exchange Commission. We answer to a board of directors and institutional shareholders. The $300,000 Kendrick stole was not my personal allowance. It was corporate capital. My mother blinked rapidly, her fake smile faltering as she struggled to comprehend the words I was using. But you are the boss, she pleaded, her voice rising in pitch. You own the company. You can just tell your accountants it was a corporate bonus or an administrative error. Nobody has to know. If I cover up a fraudulent wire transfer, I replied sharply, I become an accessory to federal wire fraud. I would be violating my fiduciary duty. I would be investigated, stripped of my licenses, and sent to federal prison right alongside him. So let me make this absolutely clear to you. I am not going to delete a file. I am not going to forgive the debt. I am not going to risk spending a single day in a concrete cell to protect a man who just offered my fiancé $100 to wash his leased car. The silver-haired agent had clearly heard enough. He gave a brief, sharp nod to his younger partner. The time for discussion was officially over. Kendrick, the younger agent, commanded, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Stand up and place your hands behind your back. Kendrick let out a pathetic, high-pitched whine. He looked at Natalie, then at my father, his eyes wide with pure terror. He slowly stood up from the mahogany chair, his legs shaking so violently he could barely support his own weight. He did not try to run, he did not try to fight. He just stood there, crying silently, as the younger agent stepped behind him, grabbed his wrists, and pulled them firmly behind his back. The cold metallic click of the steel handcuffs locking into place echoed sharply across the quiet dining room. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. No, Natalie shrieked. The sound tore from her throat like a wild animal. The reality of her situation finally broke through her profound delusion. She saw her expensive house, her designer clothes, and her entire identity evaporating in front of her eyes. She did not direct her anger at the husband who had lied to her. She directed it entirely at the person who had finally stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own actions. Natalie lunged across the dining room floor, her hands curled into fists aiming directly for my face. You witch! She screamed. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. You ruined my life. I am going to kill you. She never even made it within 3 feet of me. Liam moved with a fluid, effortless speed that startled everyone in the room. Years of working in a busy emergency room had trained him perfectly for this exact moment. He had dealt with combative patients, erratic individuals, and high-stress physical confrontations on a daily basis. He stepped smoothly in front of me, planting his feet firmly on the hardwood floor, creating an impenetrable physical barrier between me and my out-of-control sister. As Natalie swung her fists wildly, Liam simply reached out and caught her wrists mid-air. He did not strike her. He did not yell. He used her own momentum to spin her gently, but firmly away from me, locking her arms safely against her sides so she could not thrash around. That is enough, Natalie, Liam said, his voice deep, calm, and completely immovable. You need to calm down right now. Natalie struggled against his grip, sobbing hysterically, screaming obscenities at me over his shoulder. Let me go, she wailed, kicking her expensive heels against the floor. She is a monster. She destroyed my husband. The silver-haired agent began to read the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent, the agent stated loudly, cutting through Natalie's hysterical screams. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. As the agent continued reciting the rights, my father finally snapped. The humiliation was too much for his fragile ego to bear. His wealthy friends were watching his perfect family crumble into absolute dust. He marched toward me, his face purple with rage, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. You are destroying this family, my father roared, his voice cracking with fury. Over a measly $300,000. You are sending your own brother-in-law to prison and breaking your sister's heart over a fraction of what you make in a single month. You are cold. You are heartless. I gave you everything. I put the roof over your head. I provided the home that allowed you to become so successful. And this is how you repay me, by humiliating us in our own home. I stood perfectly still behind Liam. I looked at my father, taking in his tailored suit. his red, angry face, and the absolute conviction in his eyes. He truly believed he was the victim. He truly believed he had provided me with a life of privilege, completely ignoring the fact that I had been financially carrying him for nearly a decade. I did not raise my voice to match his screaming. I simply reached into the leather tote bag resting on the floor next to my chair. I bypassed my wallet and pulled out a thick secondary manila folder that I had prepared exactly for this moment. I held the heavy folder in my right hand, looking my father directly in the eyes. I held the heavy folder in my right hand, looking my father directly in the eyes. "You say you put a roof over my head?" I began, my voice ringing with a chilling authority that demanded absolute attention. "That is a very interesting choice of words, Dad. Because from where I am standing, the only thing you have built is a giant house of cards." I flipped open the manila folder. The crisp sound of the thick paper slicing through the heavy tension was deafening. "You have spent my entire life reminding me of your financial sacrifices. You have paraded your wealth in front of your country club friends, acting like a brilliant titan of industry. You demanded absolute gratitude from me while constantly treating me like a second-class citizen. But the truth is, you have not been supporting anyone." I pulled out a thick stack of bank statements and legal filings, holding them up high for the entire dining room to see. "When I stopped handing over my cash 3 years ago to force you to be responsible, you made a catastrophic choice," I stated firmly. "You refused to downsize your lifestyle. You refused to live within your actual means. Instead, you decided to cannibalize your own future to maintain the illusion of massive success." My father scoffed, crossing his arms defensively. His chest puffed out, trying to project strength, but I could clearly see a faint tremor in his hands. "I do not know what kind of garbage you printed out, Olivia, but I own this luxury condo. I paid for it with my own hard-earned money. You are just trying to deflect from the fact that you are tearing our family apart. Do not dare lecture me about finances in my own home." "Are you absolutely sure about that?" I asked, pulling out the first official document with a bright red county clerk stamp. "Because according to these public records, you took out a massive secondary mortgage on this exact property exactly 18 months ago. You leveraged every single ounce of equity you had built over the last 2 decades. You signed away the deed to this condo to secure a high-interest loan you had no realistic way of ever repaying." The wealthy guests gasped collectively. The dining room erupted into shocked whispers. The woman in the green silk dress leaned so far away from my mother, it looked like she might fall out of her chair. The retired surgeon shook his head in absolute disgust. In their elite circles, financial ruin was the ultimate sin, but pretending to have money while secretly drowning in debt was completely unforgivable. It was social suicide. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her trembling hand. She looked at my father, her eyes wide with genuine, unadulterated panic. "Richard, what is she talking about?" My mother demanded, her voice shrill and completely desperate. "Tell them she is lying right now. Tell them we do not have a second mortgage. Tell them we are totally fine." "He cannot tell you that because the truth is a matter of public record, Mom." I continued, not giving my father a chance to formulate another lie. "And let us talk about where all that equity went. It certainly did not go into a responsible retirement fund or a secure investment. It went straight into funding a $70,000 destination wedding for Natalie. It went toward covering the ridiculous lease on Kendrick's luxury vehicles. It went toward country club dues and expensive catered dinners, just like this one, all to maintain the absolute illusion that you are still wealthy." I pulled the next stack of papers from the folder and tossed them onto the dining table. They landed right next to the untouched plate of roasted lamb. "Those are the official default notices, Dad," I said coldly. "You have not made a single mortgage payment in 90 days. The bank has been sending warning letters via certified mail for months. I know this because my real estate division monitors high-value distressed properties in this exact zip code. You just kept hiding the letters, hoping Kendrick's imaginary crypto millions would miraculously bail you out before Mom found out the truth." My father's face went from an angry purple to a sickening translucent shade of gray. His shoulders slumped completely. The arrogant posture he had maintained for my entire life vanished in a matter of seconds, leaving behind a broken, pathetic old man. He stared at the legal documents resting on the pristine white tablecloth, unable to formulate a single word of defense. The paper trail was absolute and undeniable. Natalie, who was still safely pinned by Liam's unyielding grip, stared at our father in absolute horror. "Dad," Natalie whimpered, her voice tiny and terrified. "Is it true? Did you really mortgage the house for my wedding? Are we completely broke?" My father did not look at her. He did not look at my mother, who was now weeping openly into her hands, realizing her perfectly curated social life was permanently destroyed. He just stared blankly at the hardwood floor. "You do not understand," my father finally whispered, his voice trembling so violently it barely carried across the quiet room. "I had to keep up appearances. If people knew my business was failing, they would stop associating with me. I just needed a little more time. Kendrick promised me his hedge fund would pay out this week. He swore to me we would have the money to clear the debt and get back on top." Kendrick, still standing in handcuffs between the two federal agents, squeezed his eyes shut and turned his head away. He had played my parents perfectly, exploiting their desperate need for social validation to fund his own massive delusions of grandeur. "Time is officially up, Dad," I said, feeling no sympathy for the man who had just tried to offer me to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "You gambled your entire life on a man who could not even afford a leased sports car without stealing my identity. You sacrificed the daughter who actually worked hard and built real wealth to appease the daughter who just wanted to play dress-up. You chose your golden child, and she brought a parasite right into your home." The whispers among the wealthy guests grew louder, turning into open, harsh judgment. A few of them were already quietly standing up, pushing their chairs back and making their way toward the hallway to retrieve their coats. They were desperate to leave the sinking ship before the stench of poverty attached itself to their own reputations. The grand 20th anniversary dinner party had devolved into a spectacular masterclass of absolute humiliation. My father slowly raised his heavy head. His eyes were hollow, completely devoid of the arrogant spark that had defined him for his entire life. He looked at the departing guests, he looked at the federal agents, and then he looked at me, completely and utterly defeated. "The bank." My father stammered, his voice cracking painfully as the last wall of his pride crumbled into dust. "The bank sent the final notice of acceleration last week. They are executing the foreclosure tomorrow morning. We are losing the condo." The word foreclosure echoed in the dining room like an absolute death sentence. The remaining wealthy guests did not even bother to say goodbye. They practically sprinted for the front door, grabbing their expensive coats from the hall closet and rushing out into the hallway as if the condo were actively on fire. Even the hired catering staff sensed the catastrophic shift in the atmosphere. They quietly began packing up the silver trays of untouched caviar and roasted lamb, retreating to the kitchen to avoid the toxic fallout of my family's total financial collapse. The younger federal agent placed a firm hand on Kendrick's shoulder and shoved him forward. Kendrick stumbled awkwardly, his expensive designer sneakers scuffing the pristine hardwood floor. He looked frantically over his shoulder, his eyes wide with raw desperation. "Richard, you have to call your legal team," Kendrick begged, his voice cracking pitifully. "You have to get me a defense attorney. I will pay you back. I swear I will pay you back." My father did not move. He kept his back turned, staring blankly at the wall, completely abandoning the son-in-law he had just spent the entire evening praising as a financial genius. Kendrick then looked down at the floor where Natalie was still curled up on the expensive Persian rug. "Natalie, baby, call my brother," Kendrick pleaded. "Tell him to wire the bail money. Please do not leave me in there." Natalie did not reach for her phone. She did not stand up to hug her husband goodbye. She just buried her face in her hands and sobbed uncontrollably, mourning the sudden, violent death of her luxury lifestyle. She did not care about Kendrick facing a decade in federal prison. She only cared that her source of endless shopping sprees and country club lunches was being hauled away in steel handcuffs. The federal agents did not wait for a heartfelt goodbye. They marched Kendrick down the long hallway, opened the front door, and escorted him out into the corridor. The heavy, solid mahogany door slammed shut behind them with a resounding thud of finality. The great crypto billionaire was gone. The dining room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of Natalie's theatrical weeping and the soft ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. My mother stood completely still for a moment, staring at the closed front door. Then her eyes slowly tracked back across the room, landing directly on me. I watched the gears turning in her mind. She had just lost her social standing. Her husband had secretly bankrupted them. Her golden child was married to a convicted felon. But standing right in front of her was her eldest daughter, a woman who legitimately earned $300,000 every single month. I was the ultimate winning lottery ticket she had completely ignored for her entire life. My mother's face crumpled. She did not look arrogant or demanding anymore. She looked completely pathetic. She rushed across the dining room, her expensive heels crunching over the shards of broken crystal from my father's dropped wine glass. She dropped to her knees right in front of me, grabbing the fabric of my jacket with desperate, trembling hands. "Olivia, please!" My mother sobbed, genuine tears finally streaming down her perfectly contoured face, ruining her expensive makeup. "You have to help us. You are the only one who can fix this. You heard your father. The bank is taking the condo tomorrow. We are going to be completely homeless. We will have nothing." I looked down at the woman gripping my jacket. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. "Mom, let go of me," I said quietly, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. She gripped the fabric even tighter, looking up at me with wild, pleading eyes. "No, listen to me," my mother begged, her voice echoing frantically in the large room. "You make so much money. $300,000 a month is a fortune. You can afford this. You can call the bank right now and pay off the entire second mortgage. You can just buy the condo outright. It would be a drop in the bucket for you. You can save your family." I gently but firmly pried her fingers off my jacket and took a step back, letting her hands fall empty to her sides. I looked at my mother kneeling on the floor, then at my father standing frozen by the table, and finally at Natalie crying on the rug. "Save my family," I repeated, shaking my head in absolute disbelief. "Less than an hour ago, I walked into this house and told you I had lost my job. I told you I had zero income and could not afford my own rent. And what did you do? You did not offer to help me. You did not ask if I was okay. You threw a $20,000 country club bill at my face and told me to max out my credit cards because you refused to support a freeloader." My father finally found his voice, stepping forward with a desperate look in his eyes. "Olivia, we were just shocked," he stammered weakly. "We did not mean those things. We were under so much stress because of the debt. You are my daughter. You cannot just stand there and let your parents be thrown out onto the street." "I can, and I will," I replied, my voice slicing through his pathetic excuses like a scalpel. "You chose your priorities, Dad. You actively remortgaged your own home to pay for Natalie's $70,000 wedding. You bought her a lifestyle you could not afford because she was the golden child. You enabled her to steal my identity and commit a federal crime just to keep up appearances. You made your bed with your golden child and her con artist husband. Now you get to sleep in it." Natalie abruptly stopped crying. She pushed herself up off the floor, her face red and blotchy, her expensive dress wrinkled and ruined. "You owe us," Natalie screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You have millions of dollars. You cannot just leave us here with nothing. It is not fair." I laughed, a harsh, cold sound that made her flinch. "Life is not fair, Natalie. You are 30 years old. It is time to get a real job and figure it out." My mother scrambled to her feet, grabbing her chest as if she were having a heart attack. She looked at Liam, who was standing quietly behind me, radiating a calm, unyielding strength. "Please, Liam," my mother begged, completely abandoning her previous disgust for him. "Talk some sense into her. Make her write the check. We have until tomorrow morning. We still have time to stop the bank." I did not let Liam answer her. I reached out and gently placed my hand over his. I looked at my mother, watching the absolute frantic desperation consuming her entire being. I slowly raised my left wrist and checked the time on my watch. "Actually, Mom," I said, keeping my tone perfectly conversational as if I were discussing the weather, You do not have until tomorrow morning. Distressed high-value properties do not always go to a public county auction. The bank already auctioned this property off in a private commercial portfolio sale at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The transaction was fully finalized over an hour ago. You do not own this house anymore. Brenda stared at me, her mouth opening and closing silently for several seconds before her vocal cords finally caught up with her sheer panic. That is impossible, my mother shrieked, her voice cracking in a high hysterical pitch that echoed painfully off the high ceilings. Banks do not just sell a luxury property in the middle of the afternoon without telling the owner. We had until tomorrow morning. I spoke to the loan officer myself just last week. Who bought it? Who would even know it was up for a private commercial sale? I watched the frantic desperation completely consume her. She was grabbing at her hair, completely destroying her carefully styled updo, her expensive diamond earrings shaking violently. She looked at my father, slapping his chest with the back of her hand in a sudden burst of rage. Do something, Richard. Call the lawyers. Someone stole our house out from under us. We will sue the bank. We will sue the buyer. I am not leaving my home. My father looked at me, his eyes begging for a different answer. Olivia, please tell me this is part of the lesson. He stammered, his voice weak, raspy, and entirely stripped of its usual arrogance. You bought it right. Your company bought the distressed debt to teach us a lesson about fiscal responsibility. You own the deed now. You are going to let us stay. I shook my head slowly, feeling absolutely nothing for the man who had so easily offered me up to federal investigators just moments prior. No, Dad. My company did not buy your debt. I do not want this condo. I do not want the financial liability, and I certainly do not want anything tying me to the two of you ever again. Natalie let out a loud, dramatic wail from the floor, clutching her knees tightly to her chest. Then who bought it? She screamed, her face streaked with ruined mascara, the absolute picture of a spoiled child whose toys had just been permanently taken away. Who took our house? The dining room was heavy with the stench of their impending ruin. For the entire evening, my family had directed all their attention, their cruelty and their judgment toward me, while completely dismissing the man standing quietly at my side. They had treated Liam like the hired help. They had mocked his profession, insulted his income, and demanded he go outside to do manual labor to earn his keep. They had paraded a fake crypto-billionaire around the dining room while ignoring the actual titan in the room. They had failed to realize that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous one to underestimate. Liam finally moved. He did not rush. He did not look angry. He stepped around me, moving toward the center of the dining room with the steady, grounded confidence of a man who possessed absolute, unquestionable authority. He stopped just a few feet away from my father. The room went entirely still. Even my mother stopped her hysterical rambling, completely caught off guard by the sudden massive shift in Liam's demeanor. He was no longer the polite, unassuming nurse standing passively in the background. His posture was commanding, his shoulders broad, and his gaze sharp, analytical, and entirely unyielding. He looked at my parents not with anger, but with the cold, clinical detachment of a doctor examining a terminal disease. Liam reached his right hand into the inner breast pocket of his simple, unbranded jacket. He did not pull out a phone to check an account balance. He did not pull out a business card. He slowly withdrew a thick, folded legal document printed on heavy ivory paper. Resting directly on top of the document was a brand new set of silver brass keys attached to a heavy steel ring. The keys clinked softly against each other in the dead silence of the room. He extended his arm, holding the heavy legal documents and the master keys out toward my father. My father looked down at the papers, then up at Liam's face, completely bewildered. "What is this?" my father asked, his hands shaking so violently he could barely raise them. "What are you handing me?" "Read it," Richard Liam instructed calmly. His voice was not loud, but it carried a deep, resonant weight that demanded immediate obedience. With trembling hands, my father reached out and took the heavy ivory paper. My mother instantly crowded in next to him, aggressively grabbing his arm, her eyes darting frantically across the dense legal text. Natalie crawled slightly closer on the expensive Persian rug, desperate to see what the document contained, realizing that her entire future was printed on those pages. I watched my father's eyes scan the top of the page. I watched him read the official embossed letterhead of the commercial bank that had held his massive secondary mortgage. I watched him read the formal notice of immediate transfer of property and the cancellation of all previous occupancy rights. And then I watched his eyes track down to lock onto the bold black ink at the very bottom of the page, right next to the red county clerk certification stamp. He read the line that clearly stated the name of the new legal owner of the luxury penthouse. My father stopped breathing. His jaw dropped open. He looked up from the paper and stared at Liam with a look of pure, unadulterated shock. It was as if he were looking at a ghost. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking frail and incredibly old. My mother ripped the paper out of his hands, refusing to believe whatever my father was reacting to. She held it close to her face, her eyes scanning down to read the exact same line. She gasped a sharp, ragged inhalation that sounded like she was physically choking on the air. She looked at Liam, then back at the paper, shaking her head violently from side to side in absolute terrifying denial. "This is a fake!" My mother whispered, her voice completely hollow, her mind unable to process the reality of the words. "This has to be a fake document. You are a nurse. You wipe down hospital beds for a living. You drive an old beat-up Toyota. You do not have this kind of money. You cannot possibly afford a multi-million-dollar property in downtown Chicago." Liam did not raise his voice to defend himself. He did not puff out his chest or boast like Kendrick had done all evening. He simply looked down at the woman who had spent the last 2 hours publicly degrading him, questioning his manhood and insulting his ability to provide for the woman he loved. "I bought it," Liam said, his voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority that shattered the final remains of their pride. "Paid in cash." The words hung in the dining room, absolute and devastating. Paid in cash. My mother stared at Liam as if he had just spoken to her in an alien language. She looked down at the heavy ivory paper in her hands, her eyes desperately scanning the legal jargon, searching for any possible loophole or administrative error. But the ink was dry, the county seal was stamped, and the reality was entirely inescapable. "In cash," my father repeated, his voice barely a hollow whisper. He slowly looked up from the document, his eyes locking onto Liam's simple denim jeans and practical work boots. How could a nurse possibly have the capital to buy a penthouse in this building in cash? That makes absolutely no sense. You change bedpans for a living. I stepped forward, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with the man I was going to marry. "You spent the entire evening mocking his profession," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the ruined dining room. "You called him a dead weight. You allowed Kendrick to offer him a $100 bill to wash a leased vehicle. You assumed that because he wears generic clothes and drives an old car, he must be completely beneath you. You were so blinded by your own obsession with fake status that you never even bothered to ask Liam about his actual family." My mother looked up, her ruined makeup smudged beneath her eyes. "His family?" She choked out, her voice trembling. "What about his family? Let me introduce you to my fiancé properly," I continued, feeling a surge of immense pride. "His full name is Liam Kensington, as in the Kensington Medical Trust. His family owns the private hospital network where you had all of your cosmetic surgeries performed, Mom. They operate the largest philanthropic medical foundation in the entire state of Illinois. Liam is the primary heir to a legacy estate that is worth more than this entire residential building combined." My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. The heavy ivory deed slipped from her trembling fingers and fluttered to the floor. My father swayed on his feet, reaching out to grip the back of a dining chair, just to keep himself from collapsing. The name Kensington carried massive weight in Chicago. It was old money. It was the kind of quiet, multi-generational wealth that my parents had spent their entire lives desperately trying to imitate. "He works in the emergency room of a public hospital because he actually cares about saving human lives," I explained, looking at my parents with absolute disgust. "He chose to be on the front lines. He chose a profession of service because he does not need to chase money. He already has it. He has always had it." Liam gently placed his hand on my lower back. It was a subtle gesture signaling that he was ready to take over. He looked at my father. He did not yell. He did not puff out his chest or raise his voice the way Kendrick had done all evening. He spoke with the quiet, articulate grace of a man who possessed absolute power and felt zero need to prove it. Richard Liam began his tone perfectly polite and impeccably measured. Earlier this evening, you told me that a man is judged by his ability to generate wealth and secure his family's future. You called me a liability. You praised a man who actively stole your daughter's identity simply because he wore expensive brands and shouted about his success. My father swallowed hard, unable to meet Liam's steady gaze. I was wrong, my father whispered, his voice cracking. I did not know who you were. That is precisely the point, Liam replied smoothly. You did not care to know who I was. You only cared about what I appeared to be. True wealth does not need to shout, Richard. It does not need to lease luxury cars it cannot afford, and it certainly does not need to remortgage its family home to impress casual acquaintances at a country club. I watched you enable the abuse of the woman I love. I watched you actively try to hand her over to federal authorities to save your own embarrassing facade. You have failed completely as a father and as a protector. Liam then turned his attention to my mother. She was shaking visibly, her hands clasped together in front of her chest in a pathetic display of submission. She looked at Liam with wide, terrified eyes, realizing she had spent the entire evening insulting a man who could buy her entire life with a single phone call. Brenda. Liam continued, his voice remaining impeccably polite but carrying a freezing undertone. You demanded that I go outside and cut your grass. You told me that if I wanted to stand in your home, I needed to earn my keep. Liam, please, my mother sobbed, taking a step toward him. I was just upset. I was stressed about the party. You have to forgive me. You are family now. You are going to be my son-in-law. Please do not do this to us. Liam offered her a small, serene smile that did absolutely nothing to warm his eyes. Actually, I found the yard work quite refreshing, he said calmly. It is always good to stay grounded and remember the value of honest labor. Something this household clearly forgot a long time ago. He slowly reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, bespoke leather checkbook and a heavy silver fountain pen. He uncapped the pen with a soft click that sounded incredibly loud in the silent room. He walked over to the mahogany console table near the entryway. Sitting right next to a vase of imported orchids was the thick envelope my mother had shoved into my chest the moment we arrived. It was the $20,000 invoice for their country club anniversary party. Liam picked up the invoice, glanced at the total amount, and laid his checkbook flat on the table. He uncapped the silver pen and began to write. The scratch of the metal nib against the thick paper was the only sound in the room. My parents watched him in paralyzed silence. Natalie had stopped crying, entirely staring at Liam, as if he were a mythical creature descending from the sky to cast judgment upon them. Liam finished signing his name with a fluid, practiced stroke. He tore the check neatly from the binding. He walked back to the dining table, stopping right at the head where my mother had been sitting. Her untouched plate of expensive catered food was still sitting on the pristine white tablecloth. Liam held the check between his fingers. He looked my mother directly in the eyes, his expression completely unbothered, utterly destroying her with the polite grace of the upper class. He let go of the paper. It fluttered down, landing perfectly on top of her crystal dining plate. For the yard work, he said. The $20,000 check rested perfectly on the center of my mother's porcelain plate. It was a crisp piece of paper that represented everything my parents had just lost. My mother stared down at the dark blue ink of Liam's signature. She did not reach for it. She did not speak. The aggressive fight had completely drained out of her body, leaving her looking hollow and incredibly fragile under the bright crystal chandelier. Liam stepped back, returning to my side. He looked at my father, who was still gripping the edge of the mahogany dining chair with white knuckles, unable to process the absolute destruction of his fake empire. As the legal owner of this property, Liam continued, his voice echoing in the absolute stillness of the room. I am officially terminating your occupancy. Because this was a commercial distressed asset sale, any previous residential agreements you held are entirely void. You are currently trespassing on my private property. I expect this condo to be completely vacated by tomorrow morning." My father looked up, his eyes bloodshot and wide with pure terror. "Tomorrow morning," he whispered, his voice cracking violently. "Liam, you must be reasonable. We have lived here for 20 years. We have heavy furniture. We have a lifetime of belongings and memories in these rooms. We cannot pack an entire luxury penthouse in one single night. Where are we supposed to go?" Liam did not blink. His expression remained a mask of polite indifference. "That is not my concern, Richard. You had 90 days of official warnings from the bank to figure out your living situation. You chose to ignore them so you could throw an extravagant party and pretend to be wealthy. I strongly suggest you use that $20,000 sitting on the table to hire an emergency moving crew and book an extended stay hotel. If you and your belongings are not gone by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I will have my private security firm escort you out of the building and the remaining property will be legally disposed of." The finality in Liam's voice left absolutely no room for negotiation or debate. At that exact moment, the few remaining catering staff members, who had been awkwardly hovering near the kitchen entrance, decided they had seen more than enough. The head caterer quietly signaled his team. They did not bother packing the remaining silver trays, the expensive crystal glasses, or the untouched food. They simply grabbed their coats, slipped out the service door, and vanished down the back hallway without asking for their final payment. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with the toxic fallout. The sprawling luxury penthouse, which had been filled with the sounds of classical music, clinking glasses, and arrogant laughter just an hour ago, was now agonizingly silent. The grand 20th anniversary celebration had officially ended in absolute ruin. My parents stood alone in the center of their shattered reality. I watched them look around the massive formal dining room. They looked at the expensive artwork hanging on the walls, the custom Italian leather furniture they had imported from Milan, and the breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows. They realized in that agonizing moment that none of it belonged to them anymore. The weight of their massive failures crashed down upon them simultaneously. Their favorite son-in-law, the supposed crypto-billionaire they had bragged about all evening, was currently sitting in the back of a federal vehicle on his way to prison. The home they had used to project their false superiority was now legally owned by the man they had relentlessly insulted and ordered to do manual labor. And their retirement, their security, and their entire future had all been completely incinerated by their own insatiable greed and their blind obsession with the golden child. My mother covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as she finally broke down into genuine ugly sobs. There was no audience left to manipulate. There were no wealthy country club friends left to impress. There was only the cold, hard reality of the consequences they had spent their entire lives trying to outrun. I turned my back on them. I had seen enough. I reached out and took Liam's hand, feeling the warm, solid comfort of his grip. We turned to leave, walking down the long hallway toward the front door to exit this toxic chapter of my life forever. "Wait!" a voice called out frantically from behind us. I stopped and turned around. Natalie was scrambling to her feet. Her expensive designer dress was twisted and her hair was a tangled mess. She stumbled across the Persian rug, practically running down the hallway to catch up to us. She ignored our parents completely. She bypassed my father, who was staring blankly at the floor, and ran straight toward me. She was clutching her designer purse like a flotation device. "Olivia, please!" Natalie begged, her voice high and breathless with pure panic. "You cannot leave me here with them. You heard Dad. They are completely broke. They are getting kicked out tomorrow morning. I have nowhere to go. Kendrick's bank accounts are going to be frozen by the FBI tomorrow morning. I have absolutely no money to my name. I do not even know how to pay my own cell phone bill." She reached out, trying to grab my arm, but Liam smoothly stepped between us, forcing her to stop a few feet away. Natalie looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "I am your sister," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "We are blood. You have that massive apartment. You make $300,000 a month. Let me come with you. Just until Kendrick gets this sorted out. I promise I will not be in the way. I can be your assistant. I can help you with whatever you need. Just please do not leave me on the street. I looked at the woman standing in front of me. This was the same sister who had happily stolen my identity. The same sister who had demanded I pay a $20,000 bill after I told her I lost my job. The same sister who had publicly humiliated me at the dinner table and then tried to frame me for a federal crime to save her own skin just 30 minutes ago. She had spent her entire life stepping on my neck to elevate herself, and now that the ground had collapsed beneath her, she expected me to catch her. I did not feel angry anymore. I did not feel sad. I felt absolutely nothing for her. I looked my sister directly in the eyes. I remembered the exact words she had said to me earlier that evening, when I told her I was unemployed and could not pay the condo fees. I let those words echo in my mind before I handed them right back to her. "You are a grown woman," I said quietly, my voice completely void of any sympathy. "Figure it out." I turned my back on her for the very last time. The heavy mahogany door of the penthouse clicked shut behind Liam and me, echoing with a profound sense of finality. It was the sound of a steel vault locking, officially severing the toxic tether that had bound me to that family for over 3 decades. We walked side by side down the quiet, thickly carpeted hallway of the luxury residential building. Neither of us spoke. There was no need for words. The silence between us was not tense or uncomfortable. It was the deep breathing silence of absolute peace after a devastating war. We stepped into the elevator, and the mirrored doors slid shut completely, erasing the floor my parents occupied from my sight. As the elevator began its rapid descent toward the ground floor, I closed my eyes and leaned the back of my head against the cool glass wall. I waited for the guilt to hit me. I waited for the crushing weight of daughterly obligation to surface, the familiar voice in the back of my mind telling me I had been too harsh, too cruel, too unforgiving. But it never came. Instead, as the digital floor numbers rapidly counted down, I felt an incredible physical lightness wash over my entire body. It felt as though a massive, suffocating boulder had been lifted directly off my chest. For 30 years, I had been the designated scapegoat and the personal bank account for people who viewed my existence entirely as a utility. I had absorbed their insults, funded their delusions, and sacrificed my own peace of mind to maintain the fake picture-perfect image of a family that never truly loved me. I had allowed them to convince me that my worth was directly tied to my usefulness. But standing in that elevator, I realized the absolute truth. I did not lose my family tonight. I finally escaped my captors. The elevator chimed softly and the doors opened to the grand marble lobby of the building. The evening concierge gave us a polite nod as we walked past his desk and pushed through the heavy revolving glass doors. We stepped out onto the sidewalk, and the crisp, cool night air of downtown Chicago immediately hit my face. It smelled like rain and city asphalt, and to me it was the most intoxicating scent in the world. It was the smell of pure freedom. Liam stopped at the curb and pulled his phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen once. Less than 60 seconds later, a sleek, pristine black Maybach glided silently around the corner and pulled up directly in front of us. The tinted windows gleamed under the amber glow of the streetlights. A professional chauffeur in a crisp, dark suit immediately stepped out of the driver's side, walked around the back of the luxury vehicle, and opened the rear passenger door for us with a respectful nod. There was no beaten-up 12-year-old Toyota waiting in a parking garage. The old car had simply been a prop, a calculated piece of theater I had used to test the true nature of my family's loyalty. And they had failed the test more spectacularly than I could have ever imagined. Liam placed a gentle hand on my lower back, guiding me into the spacious, leather-lined interior of the Maybach. He climbed in right after me, and the chauffeur closed the heavy door, instantly sealing us inside a quiet, climate-controlled sanctuary. The engine purred to life, so smooth and quiet it was barely noticeable, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, leaving the luxury condo building and the miserable people inside it completely behind. I sank back into the plush leather seat, watching the brilliant, towering lights of the Chicago skyline slide past the tinted windows. The city looked incredibly beautiful tonight. It looked full of endless, untainted possibilities. I turned my head to look at the man sitting beside me. Liam was gazing out his window, the neon city lights casting shifting shadows across his strong, calm face. He had endured an entire evening of relentless insults, profound disrespect, and arrogant posturing from people who were not worthy to stand in his shadow. He had done it all without losing his temper, without raising his voice, and without ever letting go of my hand. He had stepped in to shield me from physical harm, and he had delivered the final fatal blow to my parents' fake empire with the effortless stroke of a silver fountain pen. I reached across the center console and slipped my hand into his. His fingers immediately intertwined with mine, his grip warm, solid, and incredibly reassuring. He turned to look at me, and that same gentle, knowing smile touched the corners of his mouth. "We are going home," Liam said quietly, his voice a soothing rumble in the quiet cabin. "Yes," I replied, squeezing his hand tightly. "We are finally going home." For the first time in my entire life, I knew exactly what that word meant. Home was no longer a sprawling house filled with emotional landmines, conditional love, and endless demands. Home was not a place you had to buy your way into. Home was the unshakable peace I felt sitting right here holding the hand of a man who valued my heart far more than my bank account. Before we wrap up this journey, I want to say something to anyone watching who might be carrying a burden that was never yours to bear. Society conditions us to forgive toxic family members simply because we share the same blood. We are told to keep the peace, to turn the other cheek, and to constantly shrink ourselves to make room for their giant egos. But true healing sometimes requires you to walk away completely and permanently. Do not ever let anyone convince you that protecting your own peace is a selfish act. You are allowed to set the boundary. You are allowed to lock the door. You're allowed to stop paying the price for someone else's delusion. I looked out the window one last time as the majestic Chicago skyline reflected in the dark waters of Lake Michigan. I thought about my mother's cruel, venomous words from earlier that afternoon. I thought about the way she looked at Liam with such profound disgust, completely convinced that he was a failure who could never provide for me. They said Liam couldn't carry me. They were right. I didn't need to be carried. I just needed someone to walk beside me.